Currently, Earth. On June 16th in 1858, newly nominated senatorial candidate Abraham Lincoln addresses the Illinois Republican Convention in Springfield and warns that the nation faces a crisis that could destroy the Union. Speaking to more than 1,000 delegates in an ominous tone, Lincoln paraphrased a passage from the New Testament: "A house divided against itself cannot stand." The issue dividing the nation was slavery's place in the growing Western territories and the extent of federal power over individual state rights. Lincoln declared that only the federal government had the power to end slavery. While the southern states relied on an economy and lifestyle dependent upon the labor provided by enslaved African Americans, the North opposed slavery. The northern states also considered industrialization and manufacturing the key to America's economic future, not farming. The entrance of new states into the Union, such as Missouri, Kansas, and Nebraska, brought to a head unresolved conflicts over which government entity, state or federal, should make the final decision regarding slavery. For his part, Lincoln firmly believed that slavery was immoral and was wholly incompatible with the principles of the Declaration of Independence embodied in the phrase, "All men are created equal." However, Lincoln prioritized preserving the Union above all else. After Lincoln's speech, several of his friends expressed dismay at its radical content. Leonard Swett, a lawyer and friend of Lincoln's, later wrote that Lincoln's talk of using federal power to end slavery was unfortunate and inappropriate. Although Swett admitted that in retrospect, Lincoln was ultimately correct. At the time, the people of Illinois ultimately agreed with Swett. Lincoln lost the close Senate race of 1858 to the more moderate Stephen Douglas, who advocated states' sovereignty. Lincoln's eloquent speech, though earned him national attention, and his strong showing in the polls encouraged the people to back his ultimately successful bid for the presidency in 1860. On June 16th in 1884, the first roller coaster in America opens at Coney Island in Brooklyn, New York. This roller coaster was known as a switchback railway. It was the brainchild of a man named LaMarcus Thompson. It traveled approximately 6 miles per hour, and it cost a nickel to ride. The new entertainment was an instant success, and by the turn of the century, there were hundreds of roller coasters around the country. Coney Island, or Rabbit Island, is a tract of land along the Atlantic Ocean discovered by explorer Henry Hudson in 1609. The name Coney Island is believed to have originated from the Dutch name Coney Island. The first hotel opened at Coney Island in 1829, and by post-Civil War years, the area was an established resort with theaters, restaurants, and a racetrack. By the 1920s, Coney Island was reachable by subway, and summer crowds of 1 million people a day flocked there for rides, games, sideshows, the beach, and the 2.5-mile boardwalk completed in 1923. The hot dog is said to have been invented at Coney Island in 1867 by Charles Feltman. In 1916, a nickel hot dog stand called Nathan's was opened by a former Feltman employee and went on to become a Coney Island institution and international franchise. By the mid-1960s, the major amusement parks at Coney Island had shut down, and the area acquired a seedy image. In recent decades, it has been revitalized, however, and remains a popular tourist attraction. It's still home to the Cyclone, a wooden coaster that made its debut in 1927. capable of speeds of 60 miles per hour and with a 85-foot drop. The Cyclone is one of the country's oldest coasters in operation today. On June 16th in 1903, Henry Ford and other prospective stockholders in the Ford Motor Company met in Detroit to sign the official paperwork required to create an awesome new corporation. There were 12 stockholders that were listed on the forms, which were signed, notarized, and sent to the office of Michigan's Secretary of State. The company was officially incorporated the following day. Henry Ford made 2 attempts to establish a company that constructed motor vehicles prior to 1903. Mr. Ford actually built his first gasoline-powered vehicle, which he called the quadricycle, in a workshop behind his home in 1896. During this time, he was working as a chief engineer for the main plant of the Edison Illuminating Company in Detroit, Michigan. The introduction of the Model T in 1908 marked a milestone for Henry Ford. He had succeeded in his mission to produce an affordable, efficient, and reliable automobile for everyone. Within a decade, nearly half the cars in America were Model Ts. The Tin Lizzie, or Model T, created a large demand in our country. This led Ford to develop mass production methods, including large production plants, the use of standardized, interchangeable parts, and in 1913, the world's first moving assembly line for cars. In 1914, to further improve productivity, Ford introduced the $5 daily wage for an 8-hour day for his employees. During the late 1910s and early 1920s, Ford began construction of a massive industrial complex along the banks of the River Rouge in Dearborn, Michigan. The plant combined all the components necessary for auto production, including a glass factory, steel mill, and assembly line. When the other stockholders involved with Ford Motors resisted the idea of building the River Rouge plant due to its enormous costs, Henry Ford bought them out. In 1919, Henry Ford installed his son Edsel as president of the Ford Motor Company. Henry Ford did maintain full control of the company's operations. He also returned to the company's presidency briefly in 1943 when his son Edsel continued his eternity. In 1945, Henry Ford's grandson, Henry Ford II, took control of the company. In 1947, the legendary automaker Henry Ford continued his eternity, leaving a most awesome and very tangible legacy for our planet. On June 16, 1963, aboard the Vostok 6, Soviet cosmonaut Valentina Tereshkova becomes the first woman to travel into space. After 48 orbits and 71 hours, she returned to Earth, having spent more time in space than all U.S. astronauts combined to that date. Valentina Vladimirovna Tereshkova was born to a peasant family in Maslenikovo, Russia, in 1937. She began work at a textile factory when she was 18, and at age 22, she made her first parachute jump under the auspices of a local aviation club. This enthusiasm for skydiving brought her to the attention of the Soviet space program, which sought to put a woman in space in the early 1960s as a means of achieving another space first before the United States. As an accomplished parachutist, Tereshkova was well equipped to handle one of the most challenging procedures of a Vostok spaceflight, the mandatory ejection from the capsule at about 20,000 feet during re-entry. In February 1962, she was selected along with 3 other women parachutists and a female pilot to begin intensive training to become a cosmonaut. In 1963, Tereshkova was chosen to take part in the second dual flight in the Vostok program, involving spacecrafts Vostok 5 and Vostok 6. On June 14, 1963, Vostok 5 was launched into space with cosmonaut Valery Bykovsky aboard. With Bykovsky still orbiting the Earth, Tereshkova was launched into space on June 16 aboard Vostok 6. The 2 spacecrafts had different orbits, but at one point came within 3 miles of each other, allowing the 2 cosmonauts to exchange brief communications. Tereshkova's spacecraft was guided by an automatic control system, and she never took manual control. On June 19th, after just under 3 days in space, Vostok 6 re-entered the atmosphere, and Tereshkova successfully parachuted to Earth after ejecting at 20,000 feet. Bykovsky and Vostok 5 landed safely a few hours later. After her historic spaceflight, Valentina Tereshkova received the Order of Lenin and Hero of the Soviet Union awards. In 1963, November, she married fellow cosmonaut Andrei Nikolaev, reportedly under pressure from Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. The historic consensus is that Nikita Khrushchev saw a propaganda advantage in pairing the two. The 2 cosmonauts made several goodwill trips abroad, had a daughter, and later separated. In 1966, Tereshkova became a member of the Supreme Soviet, the USSR's national parliament, and she served as the Soviet representative to numerous international women's organizations and events. She never entered space again, and hers was the last spaceflight by a female cosmonaut until the 1980s. Our country screened a group of female pilots in 1959 and 1960 for possible astronaut training, but later decided to restrict astronaut qualifications to men. The first American woman in space was astronaut and physicist Sally Ride, who served as a mission specialist on a flight of the Space Shuttle Challenger in 1983. All historic information on this audio file can be verified on history.com.